The stagecoach lurched violently to one side as the wheel struck a hidden boulder, sending trunks and bags tumbling from the roof like autumn leaves caught in a sudden gust. And Rebecca Owens watched in horror as her entire life scattered across the dusty Wyoming plains in the summer of 1878. She pressed her face against the small window, watching helplessly as her trunk bounced once, twice, then burst open, spilling dresses and books and her mother's wedding veil across the sage-dotted landscape. The driver shouted something she could not hear over the thundering hooves and creaking wood, but the stage did not slow. They were already behind schedule, and Indians had been spotted near the pass just 2 days prior. "Wait," Rebecca cried, banging on the roof with her fist. "Please stop." "My trunk." But the stage rattled onward, leaving clouds of dust in its wake. She watched through the rear window as her possessions grew smaller and smaller, until they were nothing but dark specks on the endless golden expanse. Everything she owned in this world, everything that connected her to her old life in Boston, was now scattered like seeds across the wild frontier. The other passengers, a severe-looking woman in black and a traveling salesman with tobacco-stained teeth, offered sympathetic looks but no comfort. The woman in black finally spoke, her voice as dry as the wind outside. "The stage will not turn back, miss. Not for any reason. You would do well to accept your loss and move forward." Rebecca felt tears prickling at her eyes but refused to let them fall. She had not cried when her father died of consumption last winter. She had not cried when she discovered he had left nothing but debts. She had not cried when she accepted the teaching position in Black Hawk, Wyoming, a town she had never heard of until 3 months ago. She would not cry now. But her throat ached with the effort of holding back her grief. In that trunk had been her mother's belongings, the few precious items that had survived the cholera epidemic that took her when Rebecca was only 12. The ivory brush with its carved handle. The locket containing a miniature portrait of Rebecca's grandmother. Her teaching certificate, hard-earned over 4 years of study. The 3 dresses she had sewn herself, working late into the night by candlelight, all of it gone. The stage rolled into Black Hawk just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. The town was smaller than Rebecca had imagined, just a single street lined with weathered wooden buildings. A saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, a hotel that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. Dust hung in the air, thick enough to taste. Rebecca stepped down from the stage, her legs trembling from hours of being jostled and jarred. She wore her traveling dress, a simple gray wool that was now coated in dust. It was the only thing she owned now, aside from the small reticule that hung from her wrist, containing 37 cents and a handkerchief. The stage driver tossed down the remaining luggage to the other passengers. He was a grizzled man with a face like old leather, and he would not meet Rebecca's eyes when she approached him. "Sir, about my trunk. Could we perhaps send someone back to retrieve it? I could pay you when I receive my first wages from the school." The driver shook his head slowly. "Miss, that trunk is 20 miles back, maybe more. Could be anywhere off the road. Even if we knew exactly where it fell, sending a man out there would cost more than whatever you got inside. Besides, by now the weather or varmints or passing travelers will have got to it. I am sorry for your trouble, truly, but there is nothing to be done." He climbed back onto his seat before she could protest further, and within minutes, the stage was rolling out of town, heading north toward Montana territory. Rebecca stood alone on the dusty street as shadows lengthened around her. "Miss Owens." She turned to find a thin, elderly man approaching her, dressed in a worn suit that had seen better days. His face was kind, lined with decades of prairie sun. Yes, I am Rebecca Owens. Herbert Patterson, head of the school board. We have been expecting you. His eyes swept over her, taking in her empty hands. Is this all your luggage? Rebecca's cheeks burned with embarrassment. There was an accident during the journey. My trunk was lost. All my belongings were inside. Mr. Patterson's expression shifted from welcoming to concerned. Lost. All of it. Everything except what I am wearing and the contents of this purse. She held up the small reticule, and even to her own ears, her voice sounded small and lost. Mr. Patterson scratched his chin, clearly troubled. That is most unfortunate indeed. You see, Miss Owens, we arranged for you to board with the widow Kemper, but she expects a certain standard. She is not a wealthy woman and cannot provide clothing or personal items. We assumed you would arrive with your own possessions, as any young lady would. I understand. Perhaps if I could borrow a small sum against my wages, just enough for essentials until I can save enough to repay the debt. The old man shifted uncomfortably. The school budget is quite limited, Miss Owens. We stretched considerably just to pay your travel expenses and first month's wages. The town is still recovering from a hard winter, and money is scarce. I am afraid I cannot authorize any additional funds without calling a special meeting of the board, and that could take weeks. Rebecca felt panic rising in her chest. She had no money, no clothes, no place to stay. She was stranded in a town of strangers, 1,000 miles from anything familiar. I see. What do you suggest I do? Mr. Patterson opened his mouth to respond, but a voice interrupted from behind Rebecca. I might have a solution. Rebecca turned to see a man walking toward them from the direction of the general store. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a stormy sky. He wore the typical garb of a working cowboy: worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, dusty boots with spurs that jingled softly with each step, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. But it was his walk that caught her attention, a confident, easy gait that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. Ethan Morgan, Mr. Patterson said with obvious relief in his voice. Good timing, as always. The cowboy stopped a respectful distance away, removing his hat to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with strong features and the beginning of lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. Could not help but overhear the lady's predicament, he said, his voice a pleasant baritone with the slow, measured cadence of someone who spent more time with horses than people. Losing your belongings on the trail is a hard thing, especially for someone new to these parts. It is a difficult situation, Mr. Patterson agreed. Miss Owens is our new schoolteacher, arrived from Boston to start the fall term. Ethan's eyes met Rebecca's, and she found herself unable to look away. There was something in his gaze, a directness and honesty that seemed rare in her experience with men. Boston to Wyoming is a considerable journey for a lady traveling alone, he said. Takes courage. Or desperation, Rebecca replied, the words slipping out before she could stop them. She immediately regretted her honesty, but Ethan simply nodded, as if he understood perfectly. Sometimes they are the same thing. I came west 5 years ago with nothing but a bedroll and a borrowed horse. I know what it is to start over with empty pockets. He glanced at Mr. Patterson, then back to Rebecca. My mother left behind some things when she passed 2 years back. Dresses, personal items. My sister took what she wanted when she married and moved to Cheyenne, but there is still a trunk full sitting in the attic of my house. Not fancy Boston things, but practical clothes suitable for life out here. You are welcome to have them. Rebecca stared at him, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon. I am offering you my mother's belongings." She would have wanted them to go to someone who needed them, rather than sitting unused in an attic gathering dust. "I could not possibly accept such a generous offer from a stranger," Rebecca protested, though her heart leaped at the possibility of having clothes to wear, of not being destitute. "Why not? You need clothes. I have clothes that no one is using. Seems like a simple solution to me." Ethan's expression was earnest, without a trace of pity or condescension. He was simply stating facts the way one might discuss the weather or the price of cattle. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. Ethan's mother, Martha Morgan, was a fine woman, very involved in the community before she took ill. I think she would indeed approve of helping our new schoolteacher. And Ethan is a respectable man, Miss Owens. He owns a small ranch north of town, supplies beef to the fort and to the mining camps. His offer is made in good faith. Rebecca looked between the two men, her mind racing. Every rule of propriety she had been taught screamed that accepting such personal items from a strange man was inappropriate. But propriety was a luxury she could no longer afford. Without clothes, without basic necessities, how could she possibly begin her position as teacher? The school term started in just 3 weeks. "I would insist on paying you back," she said finally. "Once I have received enough wages, I will repay you for the value of the items." Ethan shook his head. "No payment necessary. Like I said, they are just sitting unused, but if it makes you feel better, you can consider it a loan, though I expect no repayment." "I insist." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You are a stubborn woman, Miss Owens from Boston. Determined, Mr. Morgan. There is a difference. If you say so." He settled his hat back on his head. "My ranch is about an hour's ride north of town. If you are willing, I can drive you out there tomorrow morning in my wagon. You can look through the trunk and take whatever you need. I will bring you back to town by supper time so you can get settled with Widow Kemper." Mr. Patterson nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds like an excellent plan. Miss Owens, I can arrange for you to stay at the hotel tonight. The owner, Mr. Chen, is a friend. I am sure he can extend credit until you are settled." "Thank you," Rebecca said, feeling overwhelmed by these small kindnesses from strangers. "Both of you, I am truly grateful." "Meet me in front of the general store tomorrow morning around 8, Ethan said. "We will head out then, get you sorted with what you need." He tipped his hat to her, nodded to Mr. Patterson, and walked away down the street, his spurs chiming softly in the growing darkness. Rebecca watched him go, this strange cowboy who had appeared like something from a dime novel to offer help when she needed it most. Mr. Patterson led her to the hotel, a 2-story structure that leaned slightly to the left, but appeared clean and well-maintained. The owner, a middle-aged Chinese man with intelligent eyes and a welcoming smile, showed her to a small room on the 2nd floor. "Welcome to Black Hawk," Mr. Chen said in perfect English with only the slightest accent. "Mr. Patterson says you will teach our children. This is a good thing. Education is very important." "I will do my best," Rebecca promised. Alone in the room, she finally allowed herself to sit on the narrow bed. The events of the day crashed over her like a wave, and she found herself shaking. Everything she had brought from Boston was gone. The ivory brush her mother had used every night, counting 100 strokes. Her father's pocket watch, which no longer worked but which she had cherished anyway. The books she had collected over years, their pages filled with her notes and thoughts. The photograph of her parents on their wedding day, the only image she had of them together, all of it, scattered across the Wyoming plains, lost forever. But she was not lost. Not yet. She had a job, a purpose. And tomorrow, a cowboy named Ethan Morgan would help her begin again. She lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, and watched the unfamiliar shadows play across the ceiling as night settled over Black Hawk. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, a sound both lonely and wild. Rebecca closed her eyes and wondered what she had gotten herself into. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to stretch forever. Rebecca washed her face in the basin on the washstand, wishing desperately that she had a clean dress to change into. Her gray traveling dress was wrinkled and dusty, hardly appropriate attire. But it was all she had, so she did her best to brush off the dust and smooth the wrinkles with damp hands. Mr. Chen provided a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, refusing payment. "Mr. Patterson says you will settle accounts later," he explained. "No hurry. Eat, build your strength. Wyoming is not like Boston. Everything is harder here." Rebecca ate gratefully, though her stomach was knotted with nerves. She was about to spend the day alone with a strange man, traveling to his isolated ranch. In Boston, such behavior would have been scandalous, potentially ruinous to her reputation. But Boston was 2,000 miles away, and its rules seemed increasingly irrelevant to her new life. At precisely 8 o'clock, she stood in front of the general store, clutching her small reticule. A few townspeople passed by, eyeing her with open curiosity. A young woman about Rebecca's age, heavily pregnant and holding the hand of a small child, offered a friendly smile. "You must be the new teacher," the woman said, her accent marking her as a fellow Easterner. "I am Sarah Mitchell. My husband runs the telegraph office. We heard you had some trouble on your journey." "News travels fast in a small town," Rebecca observed. Sarah laughed. "Faster than you can imagine. Everyone is excited about the school reopening. The last teacher, Mr. Perkins, left last spring to try his luck in the gold fields. Do not worry about your lost trunk. The people here are good folk. They will help you get back on your feet." "Everyone has been very kind," Rebecca admitted. "That is the way of things out here. We depend on each other. Has to be that way or none of us would survive." Sarah shifted the child to her other hip. "I heard Ethan Morgan offered you his mother's things. That is just like him. He is one of the best men in this territory, though he would never say so himself." Before Rebecca could respond, the sound of wagon wheels drew their attention. Ethan pulled up in a sturdy buckboard wagon drawn by 2 dark horses. He hopped down with easy grace and nodded to both women. "Morning, Sarah. How is Daniel?" "Growing bigger every day and keeping me up every night," Sarah replied with the weary fondness of a mother. "You are doing a good thing, Ethan. Just being neighborly." He turned to Rebecca and gestured to the wagon. "Ready to head out, Miss Owens." Rebecca bid goodbye to Sarah and allowed Ethan to help her up onto the wagon seat. His hand was calloused and strong, and he handled her as carefully as if she were made of glass, making sure she was settled before releasing her. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to set the horses in motion. They rolled out of town, heading north across the open prairie. The morning sun was already warm, promising a hot day ahead. For several minutes they rode in silence. Rebecca found herself acutely aware of Ethan beside her, the easy way he handled the reins, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon. She realized he was watching for danger, for threats she could not begin to imagine. "How long have you lived in Wyoming?" she asked finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. 5 years, like I said yesterday. Came out in the spring of 1873, right after the panic back east wiped out what little money my family had. Figured I had nothing to lose by heading west. And you started a ranch, not right away. Worked as a cowhand for a few years, learning the business. Saved every penny I could. Bought my first 100 acres 3 years ago, built the house and barn myself. It is not much, but it is mine. No bank can take it away." There was pride in his voice, the satisfaction of a man who had built something with his own hands. Rebecca found herself envious. She had never owned anything of significance, had always lived in rented rooms or her father's house. "What made you want to become a teacher?" Ethan asked. "My mother was a teacher before she married. She taught me to read when I was 4 years old, and from that moment, I knew there was nothing more important than education. Books were my escape, my window to worlds beyond our small apartment." Rebecca paused, remembering. "When my father lost his position at the bank and we had to economize, he wanted me to stop my studies and find work in a factory. But my mother insisted I continue. She worked herself nearly to death, taking in laundry and sewing, so I could attend the normal school and earn my teaching certificate. She must have been a remarkable woman." "She was. The cholera took her before she could see me graduate. I think she would have been proud." "I am certain of it." They rode on, the landscape opening up around them in endless rolling hills covered in prairie grass and sage. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. Rebecca had never seen so much open space, so much sky. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Do you miss Boston?" Ethan asked. "I miss what Boston represented: security, familiarity. But the city itself? No, there was nothing left for me there but memories and debt." She glanced at him. "Do you ever think about going back east?" Ethan shook his head firmly. "Never. Out here, a man's worth is measured by what he does, not who his family is or how much money he has. I can look at my land, my cattle, and know I earned them through hard work. That means something." Rebecca understood exactly what he meant. She was beginning to realize that coming to Wyoming was not just a job, but a chance to reinvent herself, to become someone new. After an hour of riding, Ethan turned the wagon onto a narrow track that led over a low rise. As they crested the hill, Rebecca caught her first glimpse of the Morgan Ranch. It was modest but well-maintained, a single-story log house with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Behind it stood a barn and several corrals, where cattle grazed peacefully. A vegetable garden flourished near the house and chickens pecked in the yard. The whole scene had an air of careful tending, of pride and ownership. "It is beautiful," Rebecca said, and meant it. There was something appealing about the simplicity, the honesty of the place. Ethan looked pleased by her reaction. "It suits me. Plenty of work to keep me busy, but peaceful too. Only neighbors are a Crow family about 5 miles east. Good people. They taught me how to read the weather, where to find water during dry spells." He pulled the wagon up to the house and helped Rebecca down. Up close, she could see the quality of the construction. The logs were tightly fitted, the roof shingled with care. Window boxes held wildflowers, a feminine touch that made her wonder about his mother. "Did your mother plant those flowers?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "She insisted on having something beautiful to look at, said a home needed more than just function. I keep them going in her memory, though I do not have her skill with growing things." He led Rebecca inside, and she found herself in a surprisingly comfortable main room. A large fireplace dominated one wall, with sturdy furniture arranged around it. The kitchen area occupied another corner, with a black iron stove and shelves neatly stocked with dishes and supplies. Everything was clean and organized, though lacking any real decoration beyond a few simple curtains at the windows. "The trunk is upstairs in the attic space," Ethan said. "Let me fetch it down for you." He disappeared up a ladder at the far end of the room, and Rebecca heard him moving around overhead. She took the opportunity to look around more carefully. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a tintype photograph of a family. A stern-looking man, a woman with kind eyes, and 3 children. She assumed this was Ethan's family, captured in some earlier, happier time. Ethan descended the ladder carrying a large trunk, which he set carefully on the floor in front of the fireplace. "Here we are. Take your time looking through everything. I need to check on the cattle in the south pasture. I will be back in an hour or so. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen if you get thirsty." Before Rebecca could thank him, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. She heard his footsteps crossing the porch, then the sound of a horse whinnying. He was giving her privacy, she realized, a chance to go through his mother's intimate belongings without feeling watched. Rebecca knelt beside the trunk and lifted the lid. The smell of lavender sachets wafted up, and her throat tightened unexpectedly. Inside lay carefully folded dresses, petticoats, a warm winter coat, shawls, and at the bottom, more personal items. Hairbrushes, ribbons, a jewelry box containing simple pieces. She lifted out the first dress, a practical calico in a blue and white pattern. It was well made and sturdy, the kind of dress meant for daily wear on a ranch. Rebecca held it up to herself and judged it would fit reasonably well. Martha Morgan must have been about her size. One by one, she examined the contents of the trunk. There were 5 dresses in total, 2 for everyday wear, 2 slightly nicer ones for Sunday services, and 1 lovely green dress that appeared to be for special occasions. There were petticoats and a corset, stockings, a nightgown, and several aprons. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in cloth, Rebecca found a pair of sturdy boots. Everything was clean and in good repair, showing signs of careful use but not excessive wear. These were the belongings of a woman who took pride in her appearance but valued practicality. Rebecca felt a strange connection to Martha Morgan, this woman she had never met, whose clothes she was about to wear. In the jewelry box, she found a few simple pieces. A cameo brooch, a string of pearls that had yellowed with age, a plain gold wedding band. Rebecca left those untouched. They were too personal, too precious. The clothes were one thing, but jewelry felt different, more intimate. She was refolding the green dress when she noticed something at the very bottom of the trunk, tucked into a corner. A small leather-bound book. Curious, she pulled it out and opened it carefully. It was a journal, the pages filled with neat, feminine handwriting. The first entry was dated March 15, 1870. "Today we arrived at our new home in the Wyoming territory. Charles says this land will make our fortune, that we will build an empire for our children. I confess I am frightened by the vastness of this place, the endless empty space. But I must be brave for Ethan and his sisters. They are watching me, taking their cue from my reaction. So I smile and tell them this is an adventure, even as my heart aches for Massachusetts." Rebecca knew she should not read further, that this was a private record not meant for her eyes, but she could not help herself. She flipped through the pages, reading entries here and there. April 2, 1870. Ethan shot his first rabbit today. He is so proud, and Charles praised him heartily. My boy is becoming a man of the West, whether I like it or not. June 10, 1871. Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy last night. I served as midwife, having no other choice in this isolated place. The responsibility terrified me, but mother and child are both well. This territory makes us all braver than we ever imagined we could be. December 25, 1874. Our first Christmas without Charles. The children are trying to be cheerful for my sake, but I see the grief in their eyes. Ethan has taken on so much responsibility, too much for a boy of 18. But he does not complain. He works from dawn to dusk, trying to keep the ranch going, trying to be the man his father was. I am so proud of him and so worried. March 3, 1876. Ethan bought the acreage to the north today. He saved every penny for 3 years to make this purchase. He is building his own future, step by careful step. I see Charles in him, the same determination but without his father's recklessness. Ethan learned from his father's mistakes. He will succeed where Charles failed. The final entry was dated June 15, 1876, just 2 lines. The pain is worse today. The doctor from the fort came and confirmed what I already knew. I must write to the girls, make arrangements. Ethan will need them when I am gone. Rebecca closed the journal gently, her eyes stinging with tears. Martha Morgan had died knowing she was leaving her son, had faced death with the same courage she had shown in life. No wonder Ethan had turned out to be the kind of man who would offer help to a stranger. He had learned it from her. She placed the journal back in the trunk, exactly where she had found it. That, at least, she would not take. It belonged here in this house that Ethan had built, a reminder of the woman who had shaped him. Rebecca selected 3 of the everyday dresses, 2 petticoats, the sturdy boots, an apron, and a warm shawl. She left the nicer dresses and the green one, feeling they were too personal. What she took was enough to allow her to function, to do her job. It was more than enough. She was closing the trunk when Ethan returned, his boots loud on the wooden porch. He came inside and glanced at the small pile of clothing she had set aside. "That is all you are taking?" he asked, surprised. "It is all I need for now. I cannot possibly take everything. It would not be right." "Miss Owens, there is no one else who will use these things. My sisters have no need of them, and I certainly do not. Please take whatever you want. This is more than generous." "I insist on paying you back." Ethan sighed, a sound of good-natured frustration. "You are the stubbornest woman I have ever met." "As I said yesterday, Mr. Morgan, determined, not stubborn." He smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "All right, Miss Determined. Let me help you load these into the wagon, and we will head back to town." As Ethan carried the clothes outside, Rebecca took one last look around the house. She could see Martha Morgan in every corner, in the carefully maintained cleanliness, in the curtains at the windows, in the flowers outside. This house had been built with love, maintained with pride. Ethan had honored his mother's memory by keeping it exactly as she would have wanted. The ride back to town was more comfortable than the morning journey. Rebecca found herself talking more freely, telling Ethan about Boston, about her students at the practice school where she had done her training, about her hopes for the children of Black Hawk. Ethan, in turn, told her about the challenges of ranching in Wyoming, about the brutal winters when cattle froze to death in the fields, about the summer droughts when water became more precious than gold. He spoke of his dreams to expand the ranch, to build a real house with multiple rooms, to perhaps one day hire help so he would not have to work 18-hour days just to stay afloat. "You make it sound difficult," Rebecca observed. "It is, but it is mine. That makes all the difference." They arrived back in Black Hawk as the sun was beginning to lower in the sky, painting everything in golden light. Ethan pulled up in front of the general store, where Mr. Patterson was waiting with Widow Kemper, a thin woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a pinched mouth. "So you are the new teacher," the widow said, looking Rebecca up and down critically. "Mr. Patterson says you lost your trunk. Careless of you." "It was an accident beyond my control," Rebecca replied evenly, refusing to be intimidated. "Well, at least you have some proper clothing now, thanks to Ethan's generosity. Come along, then. I will show you to your room. I expect promptness at meals, cleanliness, and absolutely no gentleman callers." Rebecca glanced at Ethan, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Thank you again, Mr. Morgan. I am in your debt." "No debt, Miss Owens. Just neighbors helping neighbors." He tipped his hat to her, nodded to the others, and drove away. Rebecca followed Widow Kemper to a small but tidy house at the edge of town. Her room was upstairs, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a dresser, and a small desk, but it was clean and had a window overlooking the street. Breakfast is at 6, dinner at noon when you come home from school, supper at 6 in the evening. I do not tolerate tardiness, the widow announced. Rent is $5 a month, due on the 1st. Mr. Patterson says your salary will cover it. Yes, madam. You may unpack. Supper will be ready in 1 hour. The widow left, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. Rebecca laid the dresses out on the bed, smoothing the fabric carefully. These simple garments represented a fresh start, a gift from a woman she had never met, delivered by a man who asked nothing in return. She thought of Martha Morgan's journal entries, of the courage it took to build a life in this harsh land. If Martha Morgan could face the wilderness with grace and determination, surely Rebecca could manage to teach a classroom of frontier children. That night, lying in her narrow bed in Widow Kemper's house, Rebecca found herself thinking about Ethan Morgan. About his quiet strength, his generosity, the way he had given her privacy to go through his mother's belongings. About how he had spoken of his dreams with such certainty, as if failure was not even a possibility. She told herself she was simply grateful to him, nothing more. But when she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of gray eyes and a gentle smile, of wide open spaces and endless sky. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Mr. Patterson showed Rebecca the schoolhouse, a single-room building at the north end of town that had been closed for months. Dust covered every surface, and the few books on the shelves were outdated and falling apart. Rebecca spent her days cleaning, organizing, planning lessons with the meager supplies available. The townspeople stopped by regularly, introducing themselves, bringing small gifts to help her settle in. Sarah Mitchell brought a sampler she had embroidered, which Rebecca hung on the wall of her room. Mr. Chen from the hotel brought a beautiful painted fan, explaining it had belonged to his late wife. Even Widow Kemper thawed slightly, offering Rebecca use of her small library. Rebecca saw Ethan only twice during those weeks. The first time was on Sunday, at the small church service held in the saloon since the town had no proper church building. He sat in the back, his hat in his hands, and nodded to her when their eyes met. The second time was when he came into town for supplies. He stopped to ask how her preparations were going, if she needed anything else. Their conversation was brief, but Rebecca found herself thinking about it long after he had gone. She told herself she was being foolish. Ethan Morgan had been kind to her, nothing more. He had offered help as he would to anyone in need. To read anything more into his actions would be ridiculous. Still, she found herself looking for him whenever she walked down the main street. The night before the school term was to begin, Rebecca could not sleep. She lay awake, going over her lesson plans, worrying about whether the children would accept her, whether she was truly prepared for this enormous responsibility. Finally, she gave up trying to sleep and went to sit by the window. The street below was dark and quiet, lit only by moonlight. Black Hawk was asleep, this strange little town that was now her home. In the distance, she could see the black silhouettes of the mountains against the star-filled sky. She thought of her father, who had wanted her to marry the son of his employer, a boring man twice her age who spoke only of money. She thought of her mother, who had sacrificed everything so Rebecca could have a better life. She thought of the trunk lost on the prairie, containing all the tangible memories of her old life. And she thought of Ethan Morgan, who had looked at her not with pity but with understanding, who had said, "I know what it is to start over with empty pockets as if they were kindred spirits." Rebecca pressed her hand against the cool glass of the window and made a silent promise to herself. She would make this work. She would be the best teacher these children had ever had. She would build a new life here, brick by brick, just as Ethan had built his ranch. She would not fail. The first day of school arrived with a brilliant sunrise that painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. Rebecca dressed carefully in one of Martha Morgan's calico dresses, pinning her dark hair up in a neat bun. She studied her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. She looked different than she had in Boston, already changed by the frontier. She walked to the schoolhouse at 7:30, wanting to be there early. To her surprise, several children were already waiting outside along with their parents. They fell silent when she approached, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Good morning," Rebecca said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I am Miss Owens, your new teacher." "I am very pleased to meet all of you." A man stepped forward, removing his hat. "Name is Tom Anderson. This here is my boy, James. He is 7. We are mighty glad to have a school again." "James, it is nice to meet you," Rebecca said, smiling at the freckled boy who peered at her from behind his father's leg. One by one, the parents introduced their children. By the time Rebecca unlocked the schoolhouse door at 8 o'clock, she had met 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. They filed inside quietly, taking seats at the worn desks. Rebecca stood at the front of the room, looking at their expectant faces. These were frontier children, most of them born in the territory. They had already lived through experiences she could only imagine: harsh winters, Indian troubles, isolation, hardship. What could she, a city girl from Boston, possibly teach them that would matter? But then she remembered Martha Morgan's journal. "This territory makes us all braver than we ever imagined we could be." "Good morning, students," she began. "My name is Miss Owens and I am here to help you learn, but I must confess something to you. I am new to Wyoming. I grew up in Boston, which is a very different place from here. So while I will teach you reading and writing and arithmetic, I hope you will teach me about life in the West. We will learn from each other." She saw several of the older children sit up straighter, their expressions shifting from skeptical to interested. Honesty, she realized, was the right approach with these children. They had no patience for pretense. The day went better than Rebecca had dared hope. The children were well-behaved and eager to learn, even the older ones who had gone months without proper schooling. At noon, the students went home for dinner, and Rebecca sat alone in the quiet schoolhouse, eating the simple lunch Widow Kemper had packed for her. She was reviewing the afternoon's lesson plan when the door opened. Ethan Morgan stood in the doorway, holding his hat, looking slightly uncertain. "Mr. Morgan," Rebecca said, standing quickly. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. I was in town picking up supplies and thought I would stop by to see how your first morning went." He glanced around the schoolhouse, taking in the clean windows, the organized shelves, the alphabet written neatly on the chalkboard. "Looks like you have been working hard." "It is important to start the year properly," Rebecca said. "The children have been wonderful, better than I expected, actually. They are good kids, hard-working like their parents." Ethan hesitated, then continued. "I wanted to ask you something. There are a few families who live too far from town to send their children to school every day. They would board with families in town during the week, but most people do not have extra room. I was wondering if you might consider tutoring some of those children on Saturdays. I could pay you for your time. Are you thinking of a specific family?" "The Crow family I mentioned. They have a daughter about 10 years old. Her mother wants her to learn to read and write English. The mother, Running Deer, speaks English well, but she never learned to read it. She is a widow, lost her husband to fever 2 winters ago. She works hard to keep her family going, but there is no time for her to bring her daughter to town regularly. Rebecca considered this. I would be happy to teach the girl, but I would not charge you for it. If she cannot come to town, perhaps I could go to her. Ethan looked surprised. That would mean a long ride every Saturday. Are you comfortable with horses? I rode occasionally in Boston, Rebecca admitted, though I confess not with any great skill. I could take you out there if you like. Show you the way, make the introduction. Running Deer is cautious around whites with good reason, but she trusts me. If I vouch for you, she will accept your offer. That is very kind of you. Just being neighborly, Ethan said again, but his eyes held something warmer than simple neighborliness. Rebecca felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. When would you like to go? This Saturday, if that suits you. I could pick you up at dawn. We could be there by mid-morning. You could have a lesson with the girl and I would have you back by evening. That would be fine. Thank you for thinking of me for this. You said you wanted to teach. Seemed like a good fit. He settled his hat back on his head and moved toward the door. I will see you Saturday then. Good luck with your afternoon lessons. After he left, Rebecca found it difficult to focus on her lesson plans. Instead, she kept thinking about Saturday, about another long ride across the prairie with Ethan Morgan, about the way he looked at her, as if she was someone worth looking at. She scolded herself for being distracted. She was here to teach, not to develop romantic notions about a cowboy. But as the afternoon lessons progressed, she caught herself watching the door, hoping he might return. The first week of school passed smoothly. The children were attentive and hardworking, hungry for knowledge in a way her Boston students had never been. By Friday afternoon, Rebecca felt more confident in her ability to do this job, to be the teacher these children deserved. Saturday morning arrived cold and crisp, autumn announcing its arrival with frost on the ground. Rebecca dressed in the sturdiest of Martha Morgan's dresses and the good boots, knowing she would be spending the day on horseback and in unfamiliar territory. Ethan arrived at dawn as promised, this time on horseback and leading a gentle-looking mare. This is Daisy, he explained. She is old and steady, perfect for a rider who is not experienced. She will follow my horse without much guidance from you. Rebecca approached the mare cautiously. Hello, Daisy, I hope we will be friends. Ethan helped her mount, his hands steadying her as she settled into the saddle. The ground seemed very far away, but Daisy stood perfectly still, as patient as a saint. Just relax and move with her, Ethan advised. She knows what to do. They set off toward the rising sun, the horses moving at an easy walk that even Rebecca could manage. The morning air was sharp and clean, carrying the scent of sage and dry grass. Overhead, a hawk circled lazily. Tell me about Running Deer, Rebecca said as they rode. What should I know before I meet her? Ethan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Her people have lived in this territory for hundreds of years. Then whites came and pushed them out, took their hunting grounds, killed their buffalo. Running Deer has every reason to distrust us. But she is also practical. She knows her children will have better opportunities if they can speak and read English, so she is willing to let me help her, even though I am white. How did you meet her? 3 years ago, during a bad winter storm, I found her husband and son lost on my land. They were hunting, got turned around in the snow. I brought them back to my house, fed them, let them stay until the storm passed. After that, we became friends. When her husband died, I tried to help where I could. Bring supplies, check on them occasionally. Running Deer is proud, though. She does not like charity. Everything has to be an exchange. She teaches me about tracking and reading weather signs. I bring her flour and sugar. That way, neither of us feels like we are taking advantage. Rebecca was impressed by his sensitivity. his understanding of the complex dynamics between whites and Indians. Many people in Boston spoke of Indians as savages, less than human. But Ethan saw running deer as simply another person trying to survive in difficult circumstances. "You are a good man, Ethan Morgan," she said quietly. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable under the shadow of his hat. "I just try to do what my mother would have wanted. She taught me that everyone deserves respect, regardless of the color of their skin or where they came from." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Rebecca found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait, even beginning to enjoy the sensation of movement, the feeling of freedom that came with riding across open land. "You are doing well," Ethan observed. "Most people new to riding are stiff as a board and gripping the reins like their life depends on it. You are natural. Daisy deserves the credit, not me. She is doing all the work. Still, you have good instincts." The compliment made Rebecca smile. She was discovering that she liked life in Wyoming, liked the directness of people, the way they said what they meant without artifice or pretense. It was refreshing after the subtle manipulations and unspoken rules of Boston society. After 2 hours of riding, they entered a shallow valley where a creek ran between stands of cottonwood trees. Rebecca saw several tipis set up in a cluster, and as they approached, people emerged to watch them. Ethan raised his hand in greeting, calling out something in a language Rebecca did not understand. An older man responded, gesturing for them to approach. They dismounted, and Ethan led the horses toward the camp. A woman stepped forward, and Rebecca knew immediately this was Running Deer. She was perhaps 35, with long black hair braided down her back, high cheekbones, and intelligent dark eyes that assessed Rebecca with careful scrutiny. Ethan spoke to her in a mixture of English and what Rebecca assumed was Crow. Running Deer listened, her expression giving nothing away. Finally, she turned to Rebecca and spoke in accented but clear English. "You are the teacher from the town." "Yes. My name is Rebecca Owens. Ethan told me you would like your daughter to learn to read and write English. I would be honored to teach her." "Why?" Running Deer's question was blunt. "Why do you want to help Indians?" Rebecca met her gaze directly. "Because I believe every child deserves an education, and because I know what it is like to be an outsider, to not quite belong. I am new to Wyoming with no family, no friends. I'm trying to build a new life here. I think perhaps your daughter and I can help each other." Running Deer studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are honest. This is good. I will bring my daughter." She disappeared into one of the tipis and emerged moments later with a girl of about 10, dressed in a combination of traditional clothing and a worn calico dress not unlike the one Rebecca wore. The girl had her mother's dark eyes and a solemn expression that made her seem older than her years. "This is Mary," Running Deer said. Her father's name was Many Horses, but he liked the white man's name Mary for her. He said she would need a white name to survive in the changing world. "Hello, Mary," Rebecca said gently. "Would you like to learn to read?" The girl looked to her mother, who nodded encouragement. "Yes," Mary said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wonderful. Shall we start today?" Running Deer led them to a fallen log near the creek, a shaded spot where Rebecca and Mary could work. Ethan stayed back with the horses, talking quietly with the older man Rebecca had seen earlier. Rebecca pulled a book from the satchel she had brought, a simple primer she had used with beginning students. She opened it to the first page, showing Mary the alphabet. "These are letters," she explained. "Each one makes a different sound. When you put the sounds together, they make words. Words tell stories." Mary leaned forward, her initial shyness giving way to curiosity. "Like the stories my mother tells, exactly like that." But these stories are written down so they can be remembered and shared with people far away. For the next 2 hours, Rebecca worked with Mary, teaching her the basics of letter recognition. The girl was bright and eager, absorbing information quickly. Rebecca found herself enjoying the challenge of teaching one-on-one, of adapting her methods to suit this particular student. Running Deer watched from a distance, her expression softening as she saw her daughter's enthusiasm. When Rebecca finally closed the book, announcing they had done enough for one day, Mary looked disappointed. "Can you come again?" the girl asked. "Yes, I will come every Saturday if your mother agrees." "I agree," Running Deer said, approaching them. "You are a good teacher." Mary already learned much. She paused, then added, "You will eat with us before you go. I have stew." It was clearly a gesture of acceptance, and Rebecca felt honored. "Thank you. I would like that very much." They ate a simple meal of venison stew with wild roots, sitting in the shade of the cottonwoods. Running Deer asked Rebecca about her journey from Boston, about why she had come to Wyoming. Rebecca found herself telling the story of her lost trunk, of Ethan's kindness in offering his mother's clothes. "The cowboy is a good man," Running Deer said, glancing to where Ethan sat talking with the elders. "He treats us as equals, not as savages. There are few white men who do this. He told me you taught him about tracking and weather. He is a good student. He listens. Many white men think they know everything already, that our ways are primitive, but the land teaches truth to those who listen. The cowboy listens." By mid-afternoon, it was time to leave. Mary hugged Rebecca goodbye, a spontaneous gesture that made Rebecca's heart swell. Running Deer clasped Rebecca's hand briefly, a gesture of respect and acceptance. As they rode back toward Black Hawk, the sun warm on their backs, Rebecca felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced in Boston. She was making a real difference here, touching lives in meaningful ways. "You did well today," Ethan said. "Running Deer does not trust easily. For her to share a meal with you on your first visit is significant. I like her. She is strong. She has had to be. Life has not been easy for her people." They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice hesitant. "Rebecca, I want to ask you something." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips made her pulse quicken. "Yes. Would you consider having dinner with me sometime? Not just meeting by chance in town, but a real dinner. I could cook for you at the ranch, or we could go to the hotel restaurant. Whatever would be proper." Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. This was more than neighborly kindness. This was a courtship overture, and she knew it. "Mr. Morgan." "Ethan. Please call me Ethan." "Ethan," she said, tasting his name. "I would like that very much." His face broke into a smile that transformed his usually serious expression. "How about next Saturday evening? After you finish tutoring Mary, we could have dinner at my ranch. I will make sure to have you back to Widow Kemper's house at a respectable hour." "That sounds perfect." They rode on, both smiling now, the air between them charged with possibility. Rebecca felt her life shifting in ways she had not anticipated when she left Boston. She had come to Wyoming seeking only a job, a way to survive. But she was finding something much more valuable. She was finding home. The next week passed slowly, each day stretching longer than the last as Rebecca anticipated Saturday. She threw herself into her teaching, preparing elaborate lessons, staying late at the schoolhouse to help students who were struggling. But no matter how busy she kept herself, thoughts of Ethan intruded. She found herself remembering small details. The way he handled the horses with such confidence and gentleness, the patience he showed when helping her mount, the respect in his voice when he spoke of Running Deer and her people, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Sarah Mitchell noticed Rebecca's distraction when they met at the general store on Wednesday. "You look like a woman with something on her mind," Sarah observed, her eyes twinkling. "Would this have anything to do with a certain rancher?" Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "Is it that obvious?" "Honey, the whole town is talking about how Ethan Morgan is finally courting someone, and about time too. He has been alone too long, that man." "We are just having dinner," Rebecca protested, though even to her own ears it sounded weak. "That is how it starts. Trust me, I know. My Tom asked me to dinner, and 6 months later we were married. These frontier men do not waste time when they find something they want." The idea made Rebecca nervous and excited in equal measure. 6 months ago, she had been in Boston, trapped in a life she did not want. Now she was in Wyoming, being courted by a cowboy, teaching frontier children and Indian girls. Her life had become unrecognizable, and she would not change it for anything. Saturday arrived at last, clear and warm, with a hint of autumn crispness in the morning air. Rebecca dressed carefully in the nicest of Martha Morgan's dresses, a blue calico with small white flowers. She brushed her hair until it shone, then pinned it up in a style that was both proper and flattering. Widow Kemper noticed her preparations and sniffed disapprovingly. "Courting already, and you have only been in town a month. I hope you are not the flighty type, Miss Owens. A teacher should set an example of moral behavior." "I am having dinner with a friend," Rebecca said firmly, "and I fail to see how that could be considered immoral. These frontier men can be rough. You should be careful." "Ethan Morgan is one of the most honorable men I have ever met," Rebecca replied, surprising herself with her vehemence. "I am lucky to have his friendship." The widow said nothing more, but her expression suggested she thought Rebecca was naive. Ethan arrived promptly at 7, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt and freshly combed hair. He helped Rebecca onto Daisy, and they rode out to Running Deer's camp. The tutoring session with Mary went well. The girl was making rapid progress, already recognizing most of her letters and beginning to sound out simple words. Running Deer watched with obvious pride, and when the lesson ended, she surprised Rebecca by presenting her with a small beaded bracelet. "I made this," Running Deer said, "to thank you for teaching my daughter. The pattern represents knowledge and wisdom." Rebecca was deeply moved. "It is beautiful. Thank you, truly." "You are welcome in our camp always," Running Deer said formally. As they rode away toward Ethan's ranch, Rebecca kept glancing at the bracelet on her wrist, touched by the gesture. Running Deer had given her something precious, had welcomed her into their small circle. "That was quite an honor," Ethan observed. "Running Deer does not give gifts lightly." "I am beginning to understand that. I feel humbled by her trust in me." They arrived at the ranch as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. Ethan helped Rebecca dismount and led her into the house, which he had clearly spent time preparing for her visit. The main room was spotless, with wildflowers in a jar on the table and the smell of cooking food filling the air. "I hope you like venison stew," Ethan said, suddenly seeming shy. "It is about the only thing I can cook well. It smells wonderful." He ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table along with fresh bread that he admitted buying from Sarah Mitchell. They sat across from each other, and for a moment, both seemed uncertain how to proceed. "This is nice," Rebecca said finally. "Thank you for inviting me." "I am glad you came. I do not entertain much, so I hope everything is acceptable." "It is perfect." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the awkwardness gradually dissipating. The stew was delicious, rich and savory, and Rebecca found herself genuinely hungry after the long ride and the tutoring session. "Rebecca," Ethan said eventually, setting down his spoon, "there is something I need to tell you." His serious tone made her nervous. "What is it?" When I first saw you standing in front of the general store, looking so lost and brave at the same time, something happened inside me. I cannot explain it exactly. It was like recognizing someone I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. He paused, clearly struggling to put his feelings into words. I know we have not known each other long. I know I am just a cowboy with a small ranch, not the kind of man a Boston lady would normally consider. But I care about you, Rebecca, more than I probably should after such a short time. Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she was certain he could hear it. I care about you too, she admitted. I have been trying not to, telling myself it is too soon, that I barely know you. But the truth is, I feel more myself with you than I ever did in Boston. You make me feel like I can be whoever I want to be without judgment. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. When your trunk was lost, when you stood there with nothing but the clothes on your back, you did not cry or complain. You just accepted it and moved forward. That took real courage. And when I offered my mother's things, you did not take them as charity. You insisted on paying me back, on maintaining your dignity. I admired that. Your generosity gave me more than just clothes, Rebecca said softly. It gave me hope. It showed me that there are good people in this world, people who help because it is the right thing to do, not because they expect something in return. I would like to continue courting you if you are willing, Ethan said, properly, with everyone in town knowing my intentions. I know you are new here and you need time to establish yourself as a teacher. I do not want to rush you or put any pressure on you, but I would like the chance to see where this might go. Rebecca squeezed his hand. I would like that too. They finished their meal with lighter conversation, talking about their hopes and dreams, their fears and disappointments. Ethan told her about losing his father to a foolish bet, about the years of struggle to keep the ranch going, about the loneliness of working from dawn to dusk with no one to share it with. Rebecca told him about her mother's death, about her father's descent into bitterness and debt, about the suffocating feeling of being trapped in Boston with no future. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant reds and golds, they sat on the porch and watched the stars emerge. The night was alive with the sounds of crickets and the distant call of an owl. Rebecca felt a peace she had not known in years. I should get you back to town, Ethan said reluctantly. Do not want Widow Kemper thinking I have kept you out too late. I suppose you are right. But neither of them moved. They sat side by side, not quite touching but close enough that Rebecca could feel the warmth of him, could smell the scent of soap and leather and something uniquely him. Finally, Ethan stood and offered his hand to help her up. They rode back to Black Hawk slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. When they reached Widow Kemper's house, Ethan helped Rebecca dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Thank you for tonight, Rebecca said. It was wonderful. Can I see you again? Maybe next Saturday after your lesson with Mary. Yes, I would like that. Ethan smiled, and in the moonlight he looked young and hopeful. Good night, Rebecca. Good night, Ethan. She watched him ride away, then turned to find Widow Kemper peering at her through the curtains. Rebecca ignored the disapproving look and went upstairs to her room, her heart full. The next months passed in a blur of happiness. Rebecca fell into a routine that felt right in a way nothing in Boston ever had. During the week, she taught her students, watching with satisfaction as they progressed in their reading and arithmetic. She became a fixture in Black Hawk, well-liked and respected by the townspeople. Saturdays were dedicated to tutoring Mary, who was proving to be an exceptional student. By October, the girl was reading simple books, and Running Deer had begun attending the lessons, learning alongside her daughter. Rebecca discovered she enjoyed teaching the older woman as much as the child, and a genuine friendship developed between them. But it was Saturday evenings that Rebecca lived for. Each week, after the tutoring session, Ethan would ride back to town with her, and they would have dinner together, sometimes at his ranch, sometimes at the hotel restaurant. They talked for hours, discovering each other's thoughts and dreams, learning each other's stories. The town watched their courtship with benevolent interest. Sarah Mitchell declared them perfect for each other. Mr. Patterson beamed whenever he saw them together. Even Widow Kemper grudgingly admitted that Ethan seemed like a decent man, for a cowboy. As autumn deepened into winter, Rebecca realized she had fallen in love. It happened so gradually that she could not pinpoint the exact moment, but one day she woke up and knew with absolute certainty that she loved Ethan Morgan, loved him with her whole heart. She thought he felt the same, but he had not said the words, and neither had she. They existed in a bubble of courtship, both afraid to move too fast, to presume too much. The first snow fell in late November, transforming Black Hawk into a winter wonderland. The schoolhouse was harder to heat, and Rebecca found herself arriving early each morning to start the fire, ensuring the room was warm for her students. One particularly cold Saturday, in early December, Rebecca arrived at Running Deer's camp to find it nearly deserted. Only Running Deer and Mary remained, along with two elderly women. "Where is everyone?" Rebecca asked, concerned. Running Deer's expression was grave. "The men have gone to hunt. Winter will be hard this year. We need meat to survive. The women and children have gone to stay with relatives to the north, where game is more plentiful. Will you go too? Soon." But Mary wanted to finish her lessons first. "She has been working hard on the story she is writing for you." Mary produced a carefully folded piece of paper on which she had written a simple story about a girl who learned to ride a horse. The writing was shaky but legible, the spelling mostly correct. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes at the accomplishment. "Mary, this is wonderful. I am so proud of you." The girl beamed with pride. "You are a good teacher. I will miss our lessons." "When will you return?" Rebecca asked Running Deer. "In the spring, when the weather warms. We will be back by the time the grass greens." Rebecca felt a pang of loss. She had come to look forward to her Saturdays with Mary and Running Deer, to value their friendship. But she understood the realities of survival on the frontier. "I will miss you both, but I will see you in the spring, and we will continue then." Running Deer clasped Rebecca's hand. "You are a true friend. Not many white women would come here each week, would treat us as equals. Mary will remember you always. We both will." As Ethan and Rebecca rode back toward town through the lightly falling snow, Rebecca was quiet, lost in thought. "Worried about them?" Ethan asked. "Yes. Winter is so hard. What if they cannot find enough game? What if something happens?" Running Deer is resourceful. "She has survived many winters. She knows how to take care of her family." He paused. "But your concern shows the kind of person you are. You genuinely care about people, regardless of who they are or where they come from." "How could I not care? They are good people who have shown me nothing but kindness." Instead of heading directly to town, Ethan turned his horse toward his ranch. "I want to show you something," he explained. The ranch house looked beautiful in the snow, like something from a painting. Smoke curled from the chimney, and yellow light glowed in the windows. Ethan helped Rebecca dismount and led her inside, where a fire crackled cheerfully in the fireplace. "Wait here," he said, disappearing into what Rebecca knew was his bedroom. He returned carrying a wooden box which he set on the table. "Open it," he urged. Inside, Rebecca found the most beautiful dress she had ever seen, made of deep burgundy wool with delicate black buttons and lace at the collar and cuffs. It was far nicer than anything she had ever owned, even in Boston. "Ethan, I cannot accept this," she breathed, even as her fingers caressed the soft fabric. "Yes, you can. I ordered it from a dressmaker in Cheyenne, told her your measurements based on my mother's dresses. Christmas is in 2 weeks. I wanted you to have something special, something that was yours and not borrowed. But it must have cost a fortune. It cost what it cost. Rebecca, you came here with nothing. You have rebuilt your entire life through determination and hard work. You deserve to have something beautiful." He paused, his expression vulnerable. "And I wanted to be the one to give it to you." Rebecca felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "It is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." Ethan reached up and gently wiped the tears away with his thumb. "Do not cry. I cannot bear to see you cry. They are happy tears, I promise." He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something. I have tried to be patient, to give you time to settle in, to not rush things, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you. I have loved you since that first day when you stood in the street with nothing but your courage and dignity. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you treat running deer and Mary with respect. I love how you throw yourself into teaching, how much you care about your students. I love everything about you." Rebecca's heart felt like it might burst. "I love you too, Ethan, so much. I did not think I could feel this way. I thought love was supposed to be calm and sensible like in books. But this feels like fire and lightning and coming home all at once." Ethan kissed her then, a gentle kiss that spoke of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Marry me," Ethan said. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months. But I am certain. You are what I have been waiting for. Say you will marry me, Rebecca." Rebecca did not hesitate. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." They stood in the firelight, holding each other, both overwhelmed by the rightness of it. Rebecca thought about the trunk she had lost on the trail, filled with reminders of her old life. She had mourned that loss, had felt it keenly. But now she understood it had been necessary. She had needed to lose everything to find what truly mattered. She had lost her old life, and Ethan had given her a whole new one, a better one, a life filled with love and purpose and belonging. "When?" she asked. "As soon as possible. I do not want to wait, unless you want a big wedding with lots of planning." Rebecca shook her head. "No, I want simple. Just us and the people we care about. Maybe right after Christmas." "Perfect." They made plans as the snow fell outside, transforming the world into something clean and new. They would marry at the end of December in a simple ceremony at the church. Rebecca would continue teaching, at least for now. Eventually, when children came, they would decide together what made sense. They talked about expanding the ranch, about building a bigger house with room for a family. They talked about the future with the confidence of people in love, certain that together they could handle whatever challenges came. When Ethan finally took Rebecca back to town, it was late, but neither of them cared. They were engaged, committed to building a life together. Rebecca felt like she was floating as she climbed the stairs to her room. The next morning at church, they announced their engagement. The town erupted in congratulations. Sarah Mitchell hugged Rebecca tightly, whispering, "I told you so," in her ear. Mr. Patterson shook Ethan's hand vigorously, declaring it wonderful news. Even Widow Kemper managed a thin smile. The weeks before Christmas passed in a flurry of preparation. Rebecca continued teaching, but every spare moment was spent getting ready for the wedding. Sarah helped her alter the burgundy dress to fit perfectly, adding small touches to make it even more special. The women of the town rallied around Rebecca, treating her like a daughter, making sure she had everything she needed. Ethan came into town more frequently, always finding excuses to stop by the schoolhouse, to steal a few moments with Rebecca. They were chaperoned constantly, as was proper, but they found ways to be alone, to hold hands and steal kisses when no one was watching. Christmas arrived with clear, cold weather and a blanket of fresh snow. The town gathered in the saloon for a community celebration, and Rebecca found herself surrounded by friends, by people who had welcomed her into their lives. She thought of Boston, of the cold formality of holidays there, and could not believe she had ever thought that was what she wanted. On December 28, 1878, Rebecca Owens married Ethan Morgan in a simple ceremony attended by most of the town. She wore the burgundy dress and a wreath of evergreen in her hair. Ethan wore his best suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle. Mr. Patterson, who was authorized to perform marriages, kept the ceremony brief but meaningful. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed Rebecca with such tenderness that several women in the audience were seen wiping tears. The reception was held at the hotel, with food contributed by everyone in town. There was music and dancing and laughter, and Rebecca felt more joy than she had thought possible. Sarah Mitchell hugged her and whispered, "6 months. I told you these frontier men move fast." As the evening wore on, Ethan and Rebecca slipped away to begin their journey to the ranch, to their home. The night was clear and cold with a million stars overhead. They rode slowly, savoring the moment, both overwhelmed by what they had found in each other. "Are you happy?" Ethan asked as they approached the ranch. "Happier than I have ever been in my life," Rebecca replied honestly. "I lost everything on the trail, but I gained so much more. I promised you a whole new life. I intend to spend every day making sure it is a good one. You already have." The ranch house was warm, with a fire laid ready in the fireplace. Ethan carried Rebecca over the threshold, both laughing at the tradition. Inside, everything was exactly as Rebecca remembered, but now it was hers. This was her home, her life, her future. She thought of Martha Morgan, who had written in her journal about being frightened by the vastness of Wyoming, about having to be brave for her children. Rebecca understood now what courage that had taken, what strength, and she understood why Ethan had turned out to be the kind of man he was. He had learned from the best. That night, wrapped in her husband's arms, Rebecca whispered a silent thank you to Martha Morgan, to the woman whose clothes had allowed her to start over, whose journal had given her insight into the challenges ahead, whose son had given her everything. The winter passed in quiet contentment. Rebecca continued teaching, riding into town 3 days a week with Ethan, who timed his business in town to match her schedule. The other 2 days, the older students took turns leading the class under Rebecca's detailed lesson plans. Living at the ranch meant learning a whole new set of skills. Rebecca learned to cook on the wood stove, to make bread and preserve vegetables for the winter. She learned to care for chickens and milk cows. She learned to read the weather and prepare for storms. Ethan was patient with her mistakes, teaching her with the same gentleness he showed his horses. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, Ethan mending tack or sharpening tools while Rebecca graded papers or prepared lessons. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they read aloud to each other, sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence. Rebecca had never known such peace. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting to reveal the prairie grass beneath. The first wildflowers appeared, splashes of color against the brown landscape. And one morning in late March, Running Deer and Mary returned to their camp. Rebecca resumed her Saturday lessons with Mary, who had not forgotten anything she learned. Running Deer reported that the winter had been hard but manageable, and all her family had survived. She was pleased to learn of Rebecca's marriage, saying it was clear to anyone who watched them together that they belonged to each other. As spring turned to summer, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had never given much thought to being a mother, but now that it was happening, she wanted it desperately. Ethan was overjoyed, immediately becoming overprotective, trying to prevent Rebecca from doing any physical work. She had to remind him repeatedly that pregnant women on the frontier did hard labor every day, that she was not made of glass. "I just want to keep you safe," he protested. "You and the baby both. We will be fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am strong and healthy. Nothing is going to happen to us." But she appreciated his concern, even as she gently pushed back against his overprotectiveness. It came from love, she knew, from fear of losing what he had found. In July, Sarah Mitchell gave birth to her second child, a daughter. Rebecca visited her friend and marveled at the tiny infant, imagining what her own baby would look like. Would the child have Ethan's gray eyes or her brown ones? Would it be a boy or a girl? She found herself hoping for a boy first, a son who would grow up to be like his father. As summer waned into autumn, Rebecca had to stop teaching. She was too far along to ride into town safely. The school board hired a temporary teacher, a young man fresh from Denver, to finish the term. Rebecca gave him detailed lesson plans and spent several days training him, but it was hard to let go. "You can return after the baby is born," Mr. Patterson assured her. "The children will miss you, but they understand." In October, as the leaves turned gold and red, Rebecca went into labor. Sarah Mitchell served as midwife, with running deer assisting. Ethan paced outside, clearly terrified, until Sarah finally ordered him to come inside and hold his wife's hand. The labor was long and difficult, but just after dawn on October 23, 1879, Rebecca delivered a healthy baby boy. Ethan wept when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by the reality of this new life. "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked, exhausted but elated. "Thomas," Ethan said without hesitation. "After my father. He made mistakes, but he taught me to dream big. I want our son to carry on that legacy, but with wisdom to go along with the dreams. Thomas Morgan. It is perfect." The baby was strong and healthy, with a lusty cry and his father's dark hair. Rebecca fell in love instantly, amazed by the fierce protective instinct that roared to life inside her. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming joy. Rebecca had never imagined she could love someone so much, could feel such terror at the thought of anything happening to this tiny person. Ethan was a devoted father, taking his turn walking the floor with a crying baby, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his rumbling baritone. When Thomas was 6 months old, Rebecca began teaching again, part-time. She brought the baby with her to the schoolhouse, setting up a cradle in the corner. The students were fascinated by the infant, and the older girls took turns helping care for him during recess. It was not ideal, but it worked. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered as Ethan expanded the herd and began breeding horses as well as cattle. Rebecca continued teaching, finding a balance between her work and her family. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious toddler, already showing signs of his father's determination, and his mother's love of learning. When Thomas was 3, Rebecca became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1883, she delivered a daughter they named Martha, after Ethan's mother. The baby had her grandmother's kind eyes and a sweet temperament that made her easy to love. Mary, Running Deer's daughter, was now a young woman of 15, fluent in both Crow and English, able to read and write better than many white children. She had begun helping Rebecca teach, working with the youngest students. Rebecca had high hopes that Mary would become a teacher herself one day, bridging the divide between her people and the white settlers. Running deer had become one of Rebecca's closest friends. Despite the differences in their backgrounds, they understood each other in ways that went beyond words. Both were survivors who had faced hardship and emerged stronger. Both were fiercely protective of their children. Both had learned to thrive in the harsh Wyoming landscape. The town of Black Hawk grew steadily. A proper church was built, and a new schoolhouse, larger and better equipped than the old one. More families arrived, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. Rebecca saw her students grow up, marry, start families of their own. She attended their weddings, admired their babies, felt proud of the role she had played in their education. Ethan's ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. He hired several cowboys to help with the work, building a bunkhouse to accommodate them. The original house was expanded, with proper bedrooms added for the growing family, and a parlor where Rebecca could entertain guests. The vegetable garden flourished, and Rebecca learned to preserve enough food to last through the long winters. But despite the prosperity, despite the success, it was the small moments Rebecca treasured most. Sunday dinners with their family gathered around the table, reading bedtime stories to Thomas and Martha, watching their faces light up with wonder. Working side by side with Ethan in the garden, their hands dirty, their hearts full. Sitting on the porch in the evening, watching the sun set over the mountains, feeling grateful for everything they had built together. In 1885, Rebecca became pregnant for a third time. She was 31 now, and this pregnancy was harder than the previous two. She struggled with fatigue and illness, and Ethan insisted she stop teaching entirely until after the baby was born. "The school will survive without you for a few months," he said firmly. "Our family needs you healthy." Rebecca reluctantly agreed, turning her classes over to Mary, who had proven herself to be an excellent teacher. It was hard to let go, but Rebecca had to admit it felt good to rest, to focus on her family for a while. In December of 1885, Rebecca gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The labor was difficult, and there were moments when Sarah Mitchell looked worried, when Ethan's face went pale with fear. But Rebecca was strong, and both babies were healthy. They named the boy Samuel and the girl Rose. With 4 young children, the house was chaotic but full of love. Thomas, now 6, was a responsible older brother, always eager to help with the babies. Martha, at 2, was fascinated by the twins, constantly wanting to touch them and bring them her toys. Ethan hired a woman from town to help with the housework and childcare, knowing Rebecca could not manage everything alone. As the children grew, the house was filled with laughter and noise, and the beautiful mess of family life. Rebecca sometimes thought back to her old life in Boston, to the quiet, lonely apartment she had shared with her father, and could barely remember that person she used to be. She had lost her trunk on the trail, had lost everything she owned. But in losing that old life, she had found this new one. She had found love, purpose, belonging. She had found home. Ethan still told people with a twinkle in his eye that he had given Rebecca a whole new life. But Rebecca knew the truth. They had given each other new lives. They had built something together, brick by brick, season by season, something strong and lasting and good. One Saturday afternoon, in the summer of 1889, Rebecca sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching her children play in the yard. Thomas, now 10, was teaching 7-year-old Martha how to rope a fence post. The twins, Samuel and Rose, just 3.5, were digging in the dirt near the garden, their faces smudged and their clothes filthy. Ethan emerged from the barn and came to sit beside her, taking her hand in his. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, both thinking about how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked suddenly. "Leaving Boston, coming to this wild place?" Rebecca turned to look at him, at this man she loved more with each passing year. His face was more lined now, weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes still held that same kindness and strength that had drawn her to him from the beginning. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for one single moment. This is where I was meant to be. You are who I was meant to find." "Even though you lost everything on the journey here," Rebecca smiled. "I did not lose everything. I lost things, possessions, but I gained a life, a real life. I gained you and our children and this place we have built together. I gained friends and purpose, and the knowledge that I am strong enough to survive anything. That trunk falling off the stage was the best thing that ever happened to me." Ethan raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are an extraordinary woman, Rebecca Morgan. I thank God every day that you came to Black Hawk. And I thank God every day that you were there when I arrived, that you offered help when I needed it most. You gave me more than clothes and shelter. You gave me hope. You gave me a future." They sat together, hands clasped, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The mountains rose in the distance, eternal and unchanging. The prairie stretched out in all directions, golden with summer grass. And in the yard their children laughed and played, safe and loved and free. Rebecca thought about Martha Morgan, whose journal she had read all those years ago, whose words had given her courage. She thought about Running Deer, who had taught her about strength and survival. She thought about all the women who had come before her, who had faced the wilderness and tamed it, who had built lives in this harsh and beautiful land. She was one of them now. She had become a woman of the West, strong and capable and unafraid. She had lost everything and gained everything. She had started over with nothing but courage and determination, and she had built a life worth living. As the sun set and the stars began to emerge, Ethan called the children inside for supper. They came running, noisy and dirty and full of energy, and Rebecca herded them toward the door, already thinking about the bath they would all need before bed. But she paused on the threshold and looked back at the prairie, at the endless expanse of land and sky. She thought about the trunk lying somewhere out there, its contents scattered and lost, reclaimed by the earth. She sent a silent thank you to that lost trunk, to the accident that had changed her life. Then she turned and went inside, to her family, to her home, to the life she had built from nothing. The door closed behind her with a soft click, shutting out the night, holding in the warmth and light and love. She was home. She was exactly where she belonged, and she would never be lost again.